Before we begin, remember, what you're about to hear are real encounters told by those who barely made it through. If you enjoy these stories, make sure to subscribe, click the bell, and share your own experience in the comments. You never know. Your story might be the next one told here. Some places don't just hold memories, they keep echoes. And when the fog rolls in, those echoes start to whisper back. These are stories from the abandoned and forgotten, where the mist hides more than it reveals. She thought it was just another abandoned church on the edge of town, a forgotten relic lost to time. The doors were half rotted, the pews covered in dust, and the silence felt too heavy to be empty. But once she stepped inside, she realized she wasn't alone, because something in the shadows had been waiting for someone to return. A drenched evening when Eliza stumbled upon the old church. The weathered stone facade loomed like a specter in the mist, its bell tower reaching toward the sky as if to grasp the swirling vapor above. Across the brittle grass she felt an inexplicable pull, the kind of pull one feels toward a secret long buried. The village had whispered tales about the place, prayers left unanswered, shadows that moved against the light. Local children dared each other to approach, but no one ever entered. With a glance back at the winding path she had taken, Eliza stepped inside, the heavy door creaking ominously as it swung wide. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of dust and decay. Broken pews lay scattered about, some overturned, others seemingly left in hasty abandon. Sunlight peeked through the stained glass windows, casting fragmented colors on the floor, but the effect was disconcerting, as if the light itself were struggling to enter. As she moved deeper into the church, there was an unsettling silence that wrapped around her, rendering the world outside an afterthought. The whispers of her village friends echoed in her mind, warnings of the strange happenings that surrounded this place. Some spoke of figures seen in the corners of vision, always just out of focus, while others recalled the chilling sound of children laughing, only to turn and find no one there. Eliza dismissed the thoughts, laughing nervously to herself, her footsteps the only sound breaking the profound quiet. Just as she reached the altar, she noticed a journal resting atop it, worn and dusty. She picked it up, turning the fragile pages, revealing entries written in an erratic scrawl. They spoke of visions, dreadful nightmares that intruded on waking hours, of an entity that demanded attention, a figure that emerged from the shadows. The last entry was frantic and incoherent, hinting at a mounting dread, a warning to never look behind. A chill raced down her spine. She felt an unshakable compulsion to glance back. Slowly, with the weight of foreboding upon her, she turned. There, in the far corner of the church, an unnatural darkness seemed to thicken, pulling at the corners of her vision. A silhouette lurked there, unmoving, just beyond the edges of the feeble light. Panic surged through her. Eliza tore her gaze away and dashed toward the door, heart pounding in her chest. Her fingers fumbled on the ancient handle, dread pooling in her stomach as she felt the heaviness of unseen eyes on her back. Just when the door swung open, a cold voice, almost a whisper, brushed against her ear. "Stay." She bolted into the fog, gasping for air, convinced she could still feel that dark presence at her heels. She ran down the path, the mist coiling around her legs like a serpent. The village lights glimmered in the distance, small beacons of hope, yet as she sprinted towards them, an agonizing realization settled in her mind. She could still hear laughter, soft, taunting, echoing in the air, and with every step she took, the laughter persisted, blending seamlessly into the whispers of the night. As she reached the edge of the village, Eliza stumbled, tripping over her own feet. She looked back one last time, breathless, heart racing. The church stood stark against the fog, yet it was different now. Something about it was more alive, pulsing with a life of its own. The silhouette remained in the window, no longer a shadow but a figure, a person, grinning, watching her. The old church doors creaked open slowly, and the laughter crescendoed, intertwining with the fading whispers of her name, beckoning her back. She stood transfixed for a moment, the horror of her flight replaced by a growing curiosity, a need to understand what called her. Was it truly a nightmare, or had she awakened something that would never let her go? The fog cocooned her as she took a hesitant step back toward the darkness, and the laughter enveloped her like a shroud. The lighthouse stood alone at the edge of the fog, its light long dead. Waves crashed against the cliffs, swallowing every sound, except one. A faint voice calling her name through the mist, echoing from somewhere deep within the tower. But no one else was supposed to be there that night. The fog rolled in thick, wrapping around the old lighthouse like a shroud. The beam of light from the top flickered, struggling against the encroaching darkness that seemed to seep from the depths of the ocean. Claire had always been drawn to the lighthouse, its towering structure a solitary sentinel over the crashing waves. That evening, she felt compelled to explore it one final time before winter fully settled in. As she approached, the wooden steps creaked under her weight, sound echoing strangely in the still air. The door at the entrance was ajar, swinging slightly on rusty hinges as though inviting her inside. She pushed it open and stepped into the cool, damp interior. Dust motes danced in the narrow beam of light that streamed through the windows. The air was thick with the scent of salt and decay. Claire's heart raced as she climbed the winding staircase, each step resonating with a hollow thud. The light at the top flickered erratically, casting bizarre shadows that twisted and shifted in her peripheral vision. She shook her head, trying to dispel the unsettling sensation creeping up her spine. Was it the old stories she'd heard as a child that haunted her still? Tales of sailors lost to the sea, their souls forever wandering, lured by the light only to perish in the darkness. Reaching the top, she stepped into the lantern room. The view was sweeping, a vast expanse of ocean blanketed in fog. But something was wrong. The lighthouse's light, once a beacon of hope, was now dim and struggling, pulsing like a fading heartbeat. As she approached the old mechanisms, a shiver ran through her as the temperature dropped suddenly. Her breath came out in visible puffs, white clouds dispersing in the chilly air. Then she heard it, a faint whisper. It fluttered at the edges of her hearing, sent chills down her spine. Straining to listen, she could make out words, syllables twisted with anguish and desperation. "Help us. Trapped. Lost." The words echoed, reverberating off the walls, pulling her into an abyss of dread. Claire turned to leave, but the door slammed shut. Panic gripped her as she pounded on the heavy wood. "Let me out," she screamed, but the walls began to close in. The whispers grew more insistent, wrapping around her like wet ropes, each syllable tugging at her soul. "Stay with us. Join us." Desperate, she stumbled back, knocking over an old lantern that shattered on the floor, flames licking at the dry wood. The whispers turned to screams, a cacophony of voices rising amidst the crackling sound of the fire. Shadows darted just beyond her vision, hungrily approaching, their faces twisted in agony. Claire's heart raced, pounding in her ears, drowning out the chaos surrounding her. In a moment of terror-driven clarity, she reached for the window. Throwing it open, the wind rushed in, fierce and biting, extinguishing the flames but whipping the fog into a frenzy. She clambered outside onto the narrow ledge, her heart in her throat as she looked down at the jagged rocks below. There, beneath the surface of the water, she caught sight of them. Figures, pale and distorted, faces frozen in a grimace of despair. They reached up toward her, desperate yet distant, the unmistakable imprint of life twisted by despair. With a horrified realization, Claire understood. They were not just lost souls, but the former keepers of the lighthouse, trapped for eternity. She was the next to be claimed. The whispers grew louder, drowning out her screams as she lost her footing, plummeting into the icy depths. The ocean swallowed her whole, and in her last breath, the horrific truth settled in. A new voice joined the chorus of despair, echoing in the darkness below, as she became part of the legend that lured others to their doom. In the lighthouse, the light flickered once more, its beam shining down toward the abyss while the fog thickened, waiting for the next wandering soul. The fog rolled in thicker than she'd ever seen, blanketing the woods in a white silence. Her flashlight barely reached a few feet ahead, and every step felt like walking into another world. Then came the sound, soft breathing just beyond the light. She wasn't sure if the fog was hiding something, or if it was alive. The air was thick with mist as Clara stepped onto the narrow path leading into the old woods. It was said the forest had a mind of its own, shifting and turning when you weren't looking, swallowing travelers whole. But Clara was not superstitious. She was there for a weekend of solitude to connect with nature, away from the noise of the city. As she walked deeper, the trees grew denser, their twisted branches clawing at the sky like gnarled fingers. A chill settled in her bones, but she pressed on, determined to reach a small clearing she had heard about. With each step, the sunlight seemed to fade, shadows stretching and pulling at her perception of time. She came to a clearing, its center dominated by a gnarled old tree. The bark cracked like old leather and something about it drew her in. Kneeling beside it, she noticed what seemed to be markings, symbols carved into the wood, symbols that looked both familiar and distant. Clara traced a finger along one, feeling a shiver run up her spine as it pulsed beneath her touch, as if alive. Suddenly she heard a rustling. The sound was distant, but echoed louder, and she turned, scanning the tree line for movement. A low, whispering voice filled the air, beckoning her with soft, melodic tones. Join us, it sang rhythmically like a lullaby. Her heart raced, fear gnawed at her thoughts, pushing her instincts to flee. But curiosity anchored her feet to the ground. The whispers grew more insistent. Stay with us, they called, gently promising warmth, a sense of belonging. She stepped back, the fog thickening around her, weaving in and out of her vision. Shadows danced, shifting, and through them, glowing eyes emerged, dozens of them staring and blinking in unison as if they had been waiting for her. Clara's mind raced, her logical thoughts battling against a primal urge drawing her closer. The tree loomed ominously, and she could almost feel its hunger, an insatiable craving. Stay, the voice whispered, wrapping around her like silk, binding her with unseen threads. As she fell to her knees, captivated, the shadows swirled closer. Only then did she notice their forms, twisted figures made of bark and stone, merging with the mist. They reached for her, but not with hands. They extended tendrils of smoke that coiled around her wrists like shackles, tugging her toward the tree. She gasped, struggling to resist. The markings on the tree pulsed aggressively now, the whispers rising to a cacophony. Join us, Clara, become one of us. Panic surged through her as she fought against their grasp, her arms straining as they pulled. With an adrenaline-fueled scream, Clara broke free and raced back down the path, her chest heaving, the whispers trailing off into angry hisses behind her. But beyond the clearing, the forest felt different. The path twisted underfoot, the trees closing in as if mocking her escape. Clara's heart pounded as she ran headlong, but no matter how fast she ran, the trees merely shifted, confounding her sense of direction, leading her deeper rather than closer to freedom. As night fell, the mist thickened into a shroud, smothering her with darkness. Desperation clawed at her throat. She could hear them, those whispers, calling her name softly now, laced with a familiar intimacy, weaving into her mind, planting seeds of doubt. Clara, you belong with us, it insisted in a voice she swore she recognized. You can't escape. Then, through the disorienting fog, she caught sight of something bright, a flickering light. Something in her soul stirred with hope as she sprinted towards it, but as she burst through the brush, she froze. It was the clearing again, with that old tree, its branches forming twisted hands reaching out, welcoming her back. The pulse of the tree slowed, and the forest fell silent, allowing a deep, suffocating peace to envelop her. The shadows encircled her once more, and she felt a heaviness in her heart, a creeping acceptance. "Join us," they sang, now in perfect harmony. For in the darkness of that ancient woods, Clara wasn't fleeing but returning, the pulse of the tree syncing with her own. As her thoughts faded, the last remnants of her identity slipping away, a voice as soft as morning mist whispered, "Welcome home." They said there was an old cabin hidden somewhere in the mist, one that only appeared at night. When she finally found it, the windows were glowing faintly, as if the fog itself were breathing through the cracks. Inside, the air was warm, but the whispers, they were colder than the air outside. And when the door closed behind her, it didn't sound like wood, it sounded like a sigh. In the heart of an overgrown forest, the shadows lengthened, weaving between the twisted branches and gnarled roots. Ferns whispered secrets in the unsettling breeze, and a thick fog drifted like a shroud, veiling everything in an ethereal pallor. Emily, a young woman with a penchant for exploration, had heard tales of a forgotten cabin deep within these woods, a place where the past lingered even after the living had moved on. With her heart racing and a mix of excitement and dread churning in her stomach, she ventured down the winding path, each step echoing with the crunch of dried leaves and the rustle of unseen creatures hiding just out of sight. The deeper she wandered, the more the oppressive silence wrapped around her, as if the forest were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Finally she spotted it, a dilapidated cabin half swallowed by the earth and creeping vines. The windows were cracked and dark, resembling sunken eyes peering into a world they could no longer comprehend. Squaring her shoulders, she approached, her breath hitching at the thought of what she might uncover within. The door creaked open, a long-forgotten invitation filled with a musty scent of decay and memory. Inside, the air was thick with dust, each particle illuminated by slivers of light breaking through the dirty windows. Old furniture lay strewn about like the remnants of a failed life, an overturned chair, a cracked mirror reflecting only the gloom around her. Emily's pulse quickened, alternating between fear and curiosity. She pressed forward, drawn to a staircase, its steps sagging under the weight of countless unacknowledged secrets. As she ascended, the wood groaned beneath her, and a chill flickered across her skin, almost beckoning her to turn back. But something pulled her onward, an insatiable need to uncover what lay at the top. There she discovered a small room, its walls lined with portraits of somber faces. They appeared to watch her, their expressions frozen in sorrow, as if warning her that some doors are best left unopened. Then she noticed a peculiar painting in the corner, different from the others. It was an eerie depiction of a girl with hauntingly familiar features, a girl who could have been Emily herself, captured in a moment of despair beneath a darkened sky. A wave of nausea washed over her, and instinctual alarm bells ringing in her mind. The air turned heavy, pressing against her chest as she stumbled back, wanting to escape, to flee before whatever presence resided there ensnared her. But then she heard it, a soft, almost innocuous whisper drifting through the air, the words threading like a spider's web around her mind. "Stay with me," it beckoned, a voice laced with despair and longing. Terrified, Emily spun around only to find no one there, the empty room echoing her panic. The whisper intensified, swirling until it filled her mind, drowning her in a sea of voices, a cacophony of pleading, sorrow, and rage. "Stay with me, I won't let you leave." Emily turned to flee, scrambling down the staircase in a frenzy. Each step felt as if she was being dragged back, an invisible force tethering her to the cabin's dark history. The door wouldn't budge, it slammed shut as though it had a will of its own. Panic surged through her, and she slammed against it, desperate for freedom, her breath quickening until the room spun. Just when she thought the force would crush her, it relented, the door creaking open as if releasing her for having passed the test of will. She stumbled into the forest, the daylight bathing her in a false sense of safety. Heart racing, she sprinted back the way she came, branches scratching at her sides, the whispers now a chorus, warning her she was not alone. As she broke free from the trees, fear coursed through her as she glanced back just once, expecting the cabin to remain hauntingly still. Instead, it was gone, the ground where it stood just bare earth and broken branches. In the place of the forgotten structure was an unsettling quiet, as if the forest was inhaling deeply, ready to purge the truth buried within. Days turned to weeks, and no matter how far she ran, she felt its presence shadowing her. The whispers never ceased, weaving through her thoughts, growing louder at night when she was most vulnerable. Yesterday she saw her reflection in a mirror, and for the first time, it didn't quite reflect her. The girl with familiar features stared back, smile twisted and eyes pleading. "Stay with me." The echo danced along her spine, now a familiar lullaby. And one wind-strewn night, when the air felt especially thick with intrigue, she found herself drawn back to the edge of those woods, compelled to rejoin the shadows. What had once been a heart full of fright was now bubbling with a morbid curiosity. Perhaps it was time to answer the call. If you're still here, don't forget to subscribe, click the bell, and share your thoughts below. Because these next stories take us deeper, into forests that whisper, and places that were never truly empty. There are woods that seem alive, where the wind sounds almost human, and something unseen listens back. These are stories of the forest that speak, and the echoes that answer. The forest had always been quiet, the kind of quiet that feels alive, listening. But lately, there was a whisper that followed her no matter where she went. It spoke her name in a tone too soft, too close, as if it came from inside her own head. And the more she tried to ignore it, the more familiar the voice began to sound. The forest was thick with mist, a veil that swallowed sound and light alike. Lucy had wandered off the well-trodden path, lured by a whispering voice, barely audible amid the rustling leaves. She had always felt drawn to the woods, a pull that thrummed in her veins, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. But something was different today. As she pushed farther into the thicket, the atmosphere shifted, charged with an unnameable dread. The trees twisted overhead, their branches curling like gnarled fingers reaching for her. Shadows danced along the ground, flickering in and out of her view like restless spirits. Lucy called out, hoping to hear a familiar reply, but the only sound was the soft crunch of dead leaves beneath her feet. She shivered, a chill creeping down her spine that had nothing to do with the cool air. "Hello." She ventured again, her voice sounding small in the suffocating silence. A faint echo met her ears, but it wasn't her own. The voice was too soft, too melodic, winding through the trees, coaxing her deeper into the woods. Against her better judgment, Lucy followed. The deeper she ventured, the thicker the mist became, wrapping around her like a shroud. She pressed on, the voice now a part of her, promising secrets if she would only come closer. Goosebumps erupted on her arms as she pressed through thorny underbrush, the thorns grasping at her clothes as if trying to hold her back. She paused for a moment, glancing back toward the path she had come from, but the way was gone, swallowed by the fog. Suddenly, the whisper grew clearer, more demanding. "Help me." It was a plea, one that sent a jolt of urgency through her. Lucy quickened her pace, heart racing as she felt the thrum of something ancient and powerful pulsing in the earth beneath her feet. She stumbled into a small clearing, the fog swirling thickly around her, and in the center stood an old well, its stones slick with moss. The voice emanated from within its dark depths, resonant with sorrow. "Help me. Retrieve what was lost." Lucy felt an inexplicable compulsion to approach, drawn by the promise of a truth concealed in the darkness. She peered over the edge, seeing only the abyss that lay below. "What do you need?" she called down, her voice a fragile thread against the overwhelming silence. "Your soul," the voice hissed, now laced with malice. "Give it to me and I will set you free." Lucy staggered back, a scream clawing at her throat. The air in the clearing chilled, the fog coiling tighter, revealing shadowy figures that danced just beyond her line of sight, their faces obscured, their eyes glinting with feral anticipation. Panic surged through her as she turned to run, but the shadows were faster, closing the distance, cloaked in ethereal mist. They grasped at her, brushing against her skin like ice. "You cannot leave," one whispered, its breath foul and rotten. "Join us, become one with the whispers of the woods." Lucy fought with all her strength, tearing through the mist, yet the trees seemed to shift, blocking her path, warping the world around her. Desperation clawed at her chest. She was trapped, ensnared by the very essence of the forest that had once drawn her in. In her struggle, she caught glimpses of faces in the shadows before her, lost souls, their mouths stretching into silent screams. Then, as if the forest itself recoiled from her fear, the shadows faded momentarily, revealing the well once more. The voice called again, seductive and terrifying. "It's your only chance, save yourself." They promised her everything, the escape from despair, yet the truth lay thick in the air now. She was not the first. Lucy could feel it, the weight of countless souls entwined with her own, urging her to give in. Heart pounding, she took a step back, defiance igniting in her chest. No, she would not become another whisper in the woods. But as she turned away, the mist closed in again, swallowing her screams as the shadows surged around her. The last thing she heard was the echoing laughter that filled the forest, the cold grip of realization washing over her. Deep in the woods, she realized with horror that they were right. She would never leave. The voice was now her own, lost among the whispers. She passed the old playground on her way home every night. The swings creaked in the wind. The slide was covered in rust. No one had played there in years. But one night, she heard laughter, soft, distant, and far too real. And when she turned, one of the swings was moving, as if someone had just jumped off. The town lay shrouded in a heavy fog, the kind that clung to the ground like an invisible hand gripping at the throat of every passerby. It was late autumn, and the trees stood bare, skeletal against the gray sky. Eleanor could barely remember the last time she had ventured out in this weather, but something had compelled her. Curiosity, perhaps, or an unshakable sense of dread, spiraling within her mind like the mist outside. She walked slowly, the wet pavement glistening under the flickering streetlights that struggled to remain lit against the enveloping gloom. The chill cut through her coat, sending shivers down her spine. Eleanor glanced around, the quiet weight of the fog wrapping around her like a shroud. No sound but the distant echo of her own footsteps kept her company. As she approached the old playground at the end of the street, memories flooded back, days playing with friends, laughter resonating in the air. But that was before the screams whispered through the night and before the air became thick with fear. The vanished children had become a ghost story of sorts, a dark curiosity that edged into each conversation, but never lingered long, as if no one wanted to acknowledge an evil that had tainted their little town. As Eleanor stepped into the playground, the swing set creaked, unsettling in its silence, swaying as if pushed by unseen hands. The air felt charged with something other, the remnants of joy now twisted into shadows lurking just out of sight. She approached cautiously, the mist curling around her like fingers beckoning her closer. Then she heard it, a faint giggle, light and airy, drifting just beyond reach. Eleanor froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound was innocent yet sinister, striking a chord somewhere deep within her. She called out, clearing her throat. "Hello? Is someone there?" The fog seemed to absorb her voice, wrapping it into the ether. Another giggle, slightly louder, echoed back, followed by whispers. The voices were indistinct, a chorus of children's laughter punctuated by pauses that stretched far too long, suspended like the swing above her. She took a hesitant step forward, the grass squelching under her weight, each sound amplified in the still night. Then, in the far corner of the playground, she saw movement. Glimpses of tiny figures flitting between the trees, playful yet eerie, darting just out of her direct line of sight. Pangs of panic rose within her as she instinctively retreated. Torn between fear and curiosity, she shifted closer, trying to discern what lurked just beyond the veil of fog. With a sudden rush, the laughter grew louder, more urgent, spinning around her, tantalizing yet terrifying. Desperately, she yelled again, "Please show yourselves." The fog parted slightly, and in that brief glimpse, she saw them. Shapes of children, a girl with long tangled hair and a boy clutching a worn teddy bear, both smiling wide. Their smiles were too wide, stretching as if carved from the darkness itself. Then all at once, their faces twisted into something grotesque. The laughter turned sharp and chaotic, swirling around her. Eleanor turned to flee, but as she did, the ground beneath her gave way. She stumbled, barely catching herself. A sudden silence enveloped her, the giggles fading, the air heavy with an inexplicable weight. In that moment, an overwhelming realization settled in. She was not alone in the fog. From behind her, a whisper crept into her ear, that sing-song voice echoing back, now much closer. "Wanna play?" The mist clung tighter, and the children's silhouettes appeared again, reaching out with small, cold hands. Panic surged as she felt their icy grips on her arms, an undeniable invitation far too sinister to refuse. Eleanor broke from the grasp and ran, but the whispering laughter pursued her, echoing in the fog until suddenly it stopped. She risked a glance back, the children gone, yet the fog swirled thicker, more alive. Returning home, she felt relief wash over her as the streetlights flickered back into full illumination, casting away shadows. But as she stepped inside, the familiar comfort of her home was pierced by the sharpness of that laughter, now echoing within the walls. Despair flooded her as she realized with every breath that the children had followed her. Each giggle now a promise, each footstep a reminder that in their game of hide and seek, she might never truly be found. The church had been boarded up for decades. The windows cracked and the doors chained shut. But she knew a way in. Through the side where the bricks had crumbled. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something else. A sound like a whisper behind her. Then it said her name. Not loudly. Just enough for her to know it remembered her. It was a fog-drenched evening when Eliza stumbled upon the old church. The weathered stone facade loomed like a specter in the mist, its bell tower reaching toward the sky as if to grasp the swirling vapor above. Across the brittle grass, she felt an inexplicable pull, the kind of pull one feels toward a secret long buried. The village had whispered tales about the place, prayers left unanswered, shadows that moved against the light. Local children dared each other to approach, but no one ever entered. With a glance back at the winding path she had taken, Eliza stepped inside, the heavy door creaking ominously as it swung wide. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of dust and decay. Broken pews lay scattered about, some overturned, others seemingly left in hasty abandon. Sunlight peeked through the stained glass windows, casting fragmented colors on the floor, but the effect was disconcerting, as if the light itself were struggling to enter. As she moved deeper into the church, there was an unsettling silence that wrapped around her, rendering the world outside an afterthought. The whispers of her village friends echoed in her mind, warnings of the strange happenings that surrounded this place. Some spoke of figures seen in the corners of vision, always just out of focus, while others recalled the chilling sound of children laughing, only to turn and find no one there. Eliza dismissed the thoughts, laughing nervously to herself, her footsteps the only sound breaking the profound quiet. Just as she reached the altar, she noticed a journal resting atop it, worn and dusty. She picked it up, turning the fragile pages, revealing entries written in an erratic scrawl. They spoke of visions, dreadful nightmares that intruded on waking hours, of an entity that demanded attention, a figure that emerged from the shadows. The last entry was frantic and incoherent, hinting at a mounting dread, a warning to never look behind. A chill raced down her spine. She felt an unshakable compulsion to glance back. Slowly, with the weight of foreboding upon her, she turned. There, in the far corner of the church, an unnatural darkness seemed to thicken, pulling at the corners of her vision. A silhouette lurked there, unmoving, just beyond the edges of the feeble light. Panic surged through her. Eliza tore her gaze away and dashed toward the door, heart pounding in her chest. Her fingers fumbled on the ancient handle, dread pooling in her stomach as she felt the heaviness of unseen eyes on her back. Just when the door swung open, a cold voice, almost a whisper, brushed against her ear. "Stay." She bolted into the fog, gasping for air, convinced she could still feel that dark presence at her heels. She ran down the path, the mist coiling around her legs like a serpent. The village lights glimmered in the distance, small beacons of hope. Yet as she sprinted towards them, an agonizing realization settled in her mind. She could still hear laughter, soft, taunting, echoing in the air, and with every step she took, the laughter persisted, blending seamlessly into the whispers of the night. As she reached the edge of the village, Eliza stumbled, tripping over her own feet. She looked back one last time, breathless, heart racing. The church stood stark against the fog, yet it was different now. Something about it was more alive, pulsing with a life of its own. The silhouette remained in the window, no longer a shadow, but a figure, a person, grinning, watching her. The old church doors creaked open slowly, and the laughter crescendoed, intertwining with the fading whispers of her name, beckoning her back. She stood transfixed for a moment, the horror of her flight replaced by a growing curiosity, a need to understand what called her. Was it truly a nightmare, or had she awakened something that would never let her go? The fog cocooned her as she took a hesitant step back toward the darkness, and the laughter enveloped her like a shroud. Everyone in town knew about the Holloway estate, how it had stood empty since the 1950s. They said the family who lived there never really left, even after they died. When she decided to explore it, she thought the stories were just folklore. But when the whispers began repeating her thoughts out loud, she knew the house was listening. The fog rolled in thick, pooling around the gnarled trees that lined the path leading to the old Holloway estate. Its once grand design had crumbled into a silhouette of despair over the years, its windows like empty eyes staring blankly into the darkness. Locals spoke in hushed tones of the last family that had lived there, their lives consumed by madness. It was said that those who entered the estate often did not return, or if they did, they were never quite themselves again. Sarah had always been drawn to the eerie allure of the place. On an October evening, with the sun setting in a saturated orange sky, she finally resolved to uncover its secrets. Her heart raced as she approached the rotting front door, a shroud of dread wrapping around her like the mist. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, its creaks echoing like whispers of the past. Inside, the air grew thick with the smell of mildew and decay. Dust motes danced in the dim light, filtering through the grime-covered windows. Sarah's footsteps whispered across the floorboards, which groaned in protest. She moved through the cavernous halls, her fingers trailing along the peeling wallpaper, each flake a reminder of the grandeur that once was. As she explored, she stumbled upon strange symbols etched into the woodwork, reminiscent of ancient runes, casting unsettling shadows. In the corner of the room stood a mirror, its surface fogged and crooked. Drawn to it, Sarah wiped a hand across the glass, revealing her reflection, a pale girl surrounded by darkness. But then something shifted, and she swore she saw another figure behind her, a fleeting glimpse of a woman with hollow eyes staring into her soul. Heart pounding, Sarah spun around, but the room was empty save for the flickering shadows cast by her own anxiety. She glanced back at the mirror, her reflection remained unchanged. Shaking off the encounter as a trick of the light, she ventured deeper into the house, the air growing colder with each step she took. She found herself in a sprawling parlor, the grandeur of its once fine furniture now cloaked in dust. There, on a table, lay a series of journals bound in cracked leather. Curiosity piqued, she carefully opened the first one, its pages yellowed and brittle. The entries detailed the unraveling of the Holloway family, their descent into madness chronicled with chilling precision. Whispers of things lurking behind the walls, voices calling from the shadows beckoning for release, tales of a darkness that fed upon despair. Suddenly the air thickened with an unseen presence, and the temperature dropped, an icy whisper brushing against her neck. "Leave this place," it seemed to chant, echoing off the walls. Sarah's heart raced, there had to be an exit. She dashed back, her pulse a wild drumbeat, but behind her, the shadows morphed and shifted. She burst into the hallway, retracing her steps, but losing her bearings. The house began to warp, the once familiar layout twisting like a labyrinth. Panic washed over her, the walls seemed to close in, sighing like a creature awakening from slumber. The whispers grew louder, chanting incomprehensible words until they merged into a cacophony of despair. In her frenzied flight, she caught sight of the mirror again down a dark corridor, its glass shimmering with an ethereal glow. Against her better judgment, she approached, drawn to its surface. This time as she peered in, the other figure emerged fully, a gaunt woman, lips moving silently, her eyes wide with terror, pleading for help. But then Sarah saw the truth. The woman was not an apparition. It was her reflection, twisted and aged, her own face mournfully staring back at her, trapped within the glass like a bird in a cage. The whispers surged as realization hit. This was her fate, to be undone. Her mind splintered into shards, a prisoner of her curiosity. As the last vestiges of her sanity slipped away, darkness enveloped her, swallowing all light. In the depths, she could feel the weight of countless souls, lost, forever bound to the estate that had claimed so many. The house sighed, satisfied with its latest acquisition, while the echo of her own voice, now indistinguishable from the whispers, pleaded from within the mirror, begging the next visitor to turn back. But the fog outside continued to roll in, waiting patiently for its next secret. If these stories made you glance over your shoulder, you might want to keep the lights on, because the final stories deal with reflections and things that look like us, but aren't. Some reflections aren't mirrors, they're windows. And sometimes what's on the other side starts to look back. These are stories of mirrors, doppelgangers, and things that should never have a face. Mirrors had always made her uneasy, not because of what they showed, but what they might hide. After moving into her new apartment, strange things started happening at night. Her reflection began blinking, even when she didn't. And soon it started doing other things too. The fog crept through the ancient trees like a shroud, thickening with each passing moment. The towering pines, gnarled and twisted, stood as silent sentinels, guarding the secrets of the forest. A low, lonely howl echoed in the distance, sending shivers down Mary's spine. She clutched her flashlight tightly, its feeble beam barely piercing the thick curtain of mist that surrounded her. Mary had entered the forest on a dare, her friends' laughter still ringing in her ears. "It's just a stupid story," they had said. "Nothing but old wives' tales." But as the evening light faded, the stories had taken root in her mind. Whispers of an entity that prowled these woods, a ghostly figure seeking the lost and luring the unwary into its embrace. With each step, the path grew more treacherous, the underbrush clawing at her jeans as if it wanted to pull her back. The world around her seemed to hum with an unseen energy, and the branches swayed ominously, casting grotesque shadows in her flashlight's glow. Mary called out for her friends, her voice trembling, but the only response was the wind, which seemed to mock her. She stumbled upon a clearing, the trees parting as if to reveal a hidden secret. At the center lay a decaying cabin, its windows shattered, the door creaking slightly as if inviting her inside. Heart racing, she approached, compelled by a mix of fear and curiosity. The air was heavy, saturated with the scent of moss and damp wood. She stepped inside, the room dark save for her flashlight beam, which flickered as if it sensed the danger lurking within. Old furniture lay strewn about in disarray, remnants of a life long abandoned. A musty smell mingled with a hint of something metallic, each breath a reminder that she was not alone. As the light danced across the walls, her heart dropped. There were scratches, deep and jagged, carved into the wood as if someone had tried to escape. Panic surged through her veins. Should she turn back? But something caught her eye. A mirror, tarnished and cracked, hung on the far wall. She moved closer, fascinated. Her own reflection stared back, but just beside it, she noticed a shadowy form lingering just out of reach, its features indistinguishable. She blinked and it was gone. The room spun, her breath quickening. "It's just a trick of the light," she whispered to herself, though her voice quaked with doubt. With trembling hands, she reached out to touch the mirror's surface, drawn in by the dark abyss it seemed to reflect. Suddenly a low whisper coiled around her, a voice slithering from the depths of the cabin walls. "Help me," it breathed softly. Mary recoiled, confusion and dread battling within her. Was it a plea or a curse? She turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. Her heart raced and the temperature plummeted, ice settling in her bones. Panic boiled within her as shadows flickered around her, merging into the form she had seen in the mirror. It was tall, its limbs stretched unnaturally long, fingers curled into sinister claws, and its face a void, eyes deep wells of despair. "Why do you linger?" it hissed, voice distorted and layered as if 1,000 voices spoke in unison. Mary stepped back, but the figure advanced, its presence suffocating. "You're here to help me, you're just like the rest." In that moment, realization dawned, a chilling insight that froze her soul. She was not the first to enter the woods. Friends' voices echoed in her mind, each one a memory, a promise of laughter vanished. They had been drawn into the same trap, their fates intertwined with this ghastly creature. "No," she wailed, turning to the mirror, desperate to escape. But the reflection showed the cabin forevermore, a prison devoid of hope. The door rattled, and the figure lunged toward her, becoming one with the shadows. As darkness enveloped her senses, the last thing Mary heard was the soft, mocking whisper, "Welcome home." He never liked mirrors, but after inheriting his grandfather's house, there was one he couldn't remove. It stood in the hallway, tall and old, its glass faintly warped like ripples in water. At first, he thought it was just a trick of light, until his reflection smiled when he didn't. From that moment, the mirror became more than just a reflection. It became a doorway. The forest loomed ahead, a dark curtain against the dusk sky. Old oaks twisted like gnarled fingers reaching toward the heavens, their branches whispering tales long forgotten. Climbing into his SUV, Ethan felt a sudden urge to drive closer to the heart of the woods. He wasn't an adventurous man, but something about those trees beckoned him. As he trudged along the path, shadows danced alongside him, flickering in the dense underbrush. The sun dipped lower, and the air turned heavy, pregnant with foreboding silence. A chill ran down his spine, but he dismissed it as the cooling evening breeze. After several minutes of walking, he stumbled upon an old cabin shackled by time and overgrown ivy. The windows were obscured by grime, yet a flicker of candlelight flickered inside. Curiosity tugged at him, pulling him toward the door, creaking on its rusted hinges like an old man's brittle joints. Inside, the air was thick with dust, memories suspended like cobwebs. The floorboards creaked beneath his weight. On the wall hung a series of photographs, faded black and white images capturing nightmarish moments. Figures blurred and twisted, their eyes void, mouths gaping as if caught in shrieks of despair. Each image felt alive, a scream frozen in time. Ethan's breath quickened, a primal sense of being watched crawling over his skin. He turned to leave but froze. At the far end of the room stood a mirror, its surface dark and cracked, reflecting only shadows. Something stirred within. He stepped closer, drawn by an unseen force. As his heart pounded in his chest, he caught a glimpse, his reflection rippling like the surface of disturbed water. It grinned back at him but then morphed into something grotesque. Fangs elongated, eyes gleamed with malice. Laughter neither his nor human echoed from the depths of that glass prison. Fear surged through him, a venom coursing through his veins. He stumbled back, tripping over the journal that lay on the floor. Its pages flickered open, revealing scribbled horrors, prayers mixed with curses. Words like, "They come for you and never break the glass," screamed from the paper. A realization dawned, heavy and chilling. Around him, the chilling whispers grew louder, voices mixing in a chaotic chorus. The wooden beams of the cabin groaned as if the house itself were alive, a predator waiting to strike. Ethan's eyes darted back to the mirror, where his reflection was no longer there. Instead, he saw shadows moving behind him. He whirled around, but the room lay empty, yet the whispers intensified, wrapping around him like a suffocating fog. Panic clawed at his throat. Trapped in a web of fear, he remembered the warnings in the journal. With every ounce of strength, he dashed to the door, heart racing as he pulled on the handle, but it wouldn't budge, locked by some unseen force. He turned back toward the mirror, his reflection returning, eyes wide with terror now. The entity on the other side smiled, reaching through, fingers gliding past the shattered surface. Ethan backed away, but the room closed in, shadows inching toward him, tightening their grasp. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing the darkened woods beyond. With a surge of adrenaline, he bolted outside, gasping for breath, glancing back at the cabin. Yet it stood quiet, serene now, as though nothing had happened. He stumbled into the trees, the way home lost amid the oppressive gloom. Hours later, when dawn broke, Ethan still ran, unaware of the eyes following him from the shadows, waiting for him to look back, to blink. In that moment, when the sun kissed the horizon, he dared to take a glance over his shoulder. The trees shifted, whispering secrets he would never understand, and the forest smiled. It was late when someone knocked on her door, 3 short knocks, the way her brother always did. She opened it and there he was, standing in the cold with that same tired smile. For a moment, relief washed over her, until she remembered the funeral. Whatever was standing there wasn't her brother. Through the lonely streets of Eldridge Hollow, twisting around the gnarled branches of the trees that lined the cobblestone path, the moon hung high, shrouded in clouds, casting fleeting shadows every time a gust brushed by. Sarah wrapped her coat tighter around her as she walked home from the late shift at the diner, her footsteps echoing loudly in the stillness. She had always loved the peacefulness of this little town, but tonight, a sense of unease gripped her. Glancing behind her, she saw only darkness, yet an unsettling feeling crept up her spine. The kind that whispered she wasn't alone. She quickened her pace, her heart thumping like a frantic drum. Suddenly, her phone buzzed in her pocket and she fished it out, relieved to see a message from her brother. "Hey, you okay? I had a weird feeling." She furrowed her brow, a chill running down her arms. The message was odd, almost as if he sensed something she hadn't shared. She texted back, "Yeah, just heading home." As she turned the corner, the streetlights flickered, bathing the pavement in a stuttering glow. Sarah noticed something out of place. A figure at the end of the street, dark and indistinct, swaying slightly as if caught in an invisible breeze. Panic clawed at her throat and she hesitated. "It's just a trick of the light," she murmured to herself. Yet the figure seemed to draw closer, the darkness around it deepening. With each step it took, she felt a weight on her chest, as if the air itself thickened, pinning her down. "Who's there?" Sarah called out, her voice trembling despite her attempt to sound strong. No answer, only the sound of her heartbeat echoing in her ears. As she turned to retreat, a chilling laugh echoed down the street, eerie and hollow, sending a shiver right through her bones. Was it real or a cruel figment of her imagination? Adrenaline surged and she sprinted toward home, not daring to look back. Reaching her front porch, she stumbled in through the door and slammed it shut behind her, locking it tight. The familiar comfort of her small living room felt miles away from the unease just outside. She sank against the door, gasping, her mind racing. What was that figure? Surely it couldn't have been. A knock reverberated through the house, resonating with a slow, deliberate rhythm. "Sarah?" It was her brother's voice, softer this time, almost pleading. Relief washed over her despite the strangeness of the situation. She rushed to the window and peered out. He stood under the swaying streetlight, looking anxious, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting something. Her heart swelled with worry, but every logical thought was drowned out by her growing dread. She fumbled for her phone to text him, but saw instead a string of increasingly frantic messages flashing on the screen. "Get inside. Stay inside. Don't open the door." Before she could process it, the door behind her creaked open, a cold draft slipping in. Sarah whipped around, her breath hitching in her throat. "It's okay. It's just me." A voice that sounded like her brother's echoed from within her darkened home, but it felt wrong, twisted. The voice was familiar, yet carried an undertone that distorted it, a smoothness she had never heard. Panic surged. Her brother was still outside. She had seen him. The figure was inside, calling to her in his voice. No, it couldn't be. Her gut screamed for her to run, but where could she go? Behind her, the darkness stretched, watching and waiting. Sarah stumbled backward, heart pounding. "If you're really my brother, say something only you would know." Silence answered her, thick and suffocating. Then the front door eased open completely, revealing a silhouette that looked just like him but distorted, a grinning face that hovered too close, eyes glinting like glass. The familiarity twisted into something grotesque as it took a step forward, shielded in darkness, the real horror lurking behind. "Sarah," it whispered, the voice oozing with malice. "Let me in." And all the while, outside, a frightened shout pierced the night, a scream swallowed by the wind as the moon gleamed down, indifferent to the nightmare unfolding in Eldridge Hollow. She had heard about the cabin in the woods, a place where people vanished without a trace. But she didn't believe in ghost stories, not until she saw the lights flickering through the trees. When she entered, it felt like stepping into a memory that wasn't hers. And by the time she realized the cabin was alive, it was too late to leave. In the heart of a fog-shrouded forest, there existed a dilapidated cabin, long abandoned and shunned by the locals. Whispers danced through the trees, tales of a presence that lingered in the stillness. No one dared to visit, despite the pull of curiosity that lay heavy in the air. One autumn evening, compelled by an insatiable need to confront his fears, a young man named Derek decided to explore the forsaken cabin. As he approached, the brittle leaves crunched beneath his feet, each sound swallowed by the oppressive quiet. The moonlight struggled to pierce the thick fog, casting an eerie glow that painted the pitch-black shadows into a swirling dance of shapes. He felt a shiver snake down his spine, the air thick with foreboding. The cabin loomed before him, its wooden planks warped and covered in layers of moss, as if nature itself sought to reclaim the space. Pushing the creaking door open, he stepped inside. The gloom engulfed him, and the stale air reeked of decay. His flashlight beam flickered, illuminating dust-covered furniture and darkened corners that seemed to breathe. Patterns of mildew spread across the walls, resembling lurking figures. Derek's heart raced, but he pressed on, a mix of dread and exhilaration propelling him deeper into the cabin's bowels. As he explored, he noticed a strange symbol carved into the floor, a circle surrounded by cryptic runes worn by time. The instinct to turn back clawed at him, but he felt magnetized by the bizarre etching suspended between fear and fascination. Moments passed, his heartbeat thudding loudly, echoing through the silence. When a sudden cold breeze swept through the room, it felt alive, intertwining with his very essence. Derek turned sharply toward the window, feeling a gaze pierce through the fog. For just a fleeting moment, he thought he saw a figure standing there, cloaked in shadows, its face obscured. Panic surged. Was he really alone? He backpedaled, eyes darting toward the exit, but the door slammed shut, echoing like thunder in the hushed space. He pounded on the door, adrenaline surging. But it wouldn't budge. The air thickened, pressing down on him like a weight. The flashlight flickered again, and in the dim light, surrounded by towering darkness, he could sense a shape coiling just beyond the reach of his vision, something watching, waiting. The room felt like it was swelling, squeezing him tighter until the walls cracked and whispered his name, a soft, taunting echo that made his skin crawl. Suddenly, Derek sprinted toward the corner, heart racing, desperate to escape. But something blocked his path, a wall of impenetrable darkness. He turned to look behind him, only to find the figure now closer, emerging from the shadows, draped in tattered cloth that flowed like smoke. Its face was obscured, but he could feel its eyes boring into him, filled with ancient malice. "Let me go," he shouted, voice trembling, backing away into the cold embrace of the wall. The figure did not move, but an awful dread churned in his stomach. It lifted a finger, pointing straight at him. Fear wrapped around him like a noose when he heard a voice, a low, chilling whisper that whispered fragments of his deepest, darkest fears, playing with his mind. "You can't escape yourself," it hissed, and with that the world spun. The walls melted into darkness, wrapping around him like a shroud until he could no longer discern where he began, and the darkness ended. The last thing he felt was a surge of weightlessness. Derek awoke outside the cabin, a cold sweat soaking his shirt. The panic from his dream echoed in his mind as he gazed back at the cabin, now the night sky twinkling innocently above. For a fleeting second, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. But in the silence of the woods, he heard it, a soft, familiar whisper riding the wind. "You can't escape yourself." He froze, the realization slamming into him like an icy wave. Turning abruptly, he stumbled away, only to find that every path led back to the cabin. The cabin was no longer abandoned in whispers. It was alive, watching him, waiting for the moment he would slip back inside, breaking like glass on the edge of an endless night. If you've made it this far, you're braver than most. Each of these stories leaves behind an echo, one that lingers in the quiet moments when the lights are low and the world feels still. Maybe it's just imagination, or maybe some voices were never meant to fade. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest, and which one you wish you could forget. Don't forget to subscribe, click the bell, and share this video with someone who loves a good scare. Because in the dark, stories like these are never truly over. They just wait for someone new to hear them.